Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We're going to be learning the mimer of Shabbos Parshas Mishpatim, which 40 years ago was Parshas Shkalim. This coming Shabbos, for us it's Parshas Truma and Shkalim. It is Rosh Chodesh. It's not just Shabbos and Vorchem like it was then. It's actually Rosh Chodesh Adar this coming Shabbos. And this mimer, as every mimer, especially the Mamorim of 40 years ago, when we have the concept of it already being Arboim Shnin, 40 years since it was said, and therefore it is associated and settled in the world, as Moshe Rabbeinu told the Jewish people when they were about to enter the land of Israel, that God has given you eyes to see, ears to hear, and a heart to perceive. Not in that order. Heart to perceive, eyes to see, and ears to hear on this day. And the Talmud comments that after 40 years, it has special power. This mimer, the Rebbe actually also says explicitly, as we will point out shortly, that there is a lesson and therefore energy and power and strength and inspiration for all time, for the fundamentals of what we need and what it takes to succeed in serving God. I'm using the new edition of the Mimer, recently published, the Sefer called Menachem, Sefer Mamorim Moyadim, in this series, Dalet Parshas, this new book, and it's available now for those who want to purchase it even before Purim, for Shalach Monas. Just recently collected all the Rebbe's Mamorim from all the years that are associated with the four special Parshas that we read in proximity to Purim and Pesach. So I'm using this new version, and it's also on your screen. But it's, of course, not different than the previous versions. It's just written a little bit in a different order, and sometimes it flows a little differently. But, of course, it's the same mimer. And without further ado, Ki Seesa, Bnei Yisrael Lifkudeim, Gamer Zayitnu, Gamer Lachabral Nafshesechem. So in the special Parsha of Shkalim, which is the beginning of Parshas Seesa, which we're actually going to be reading in 2 weeks as the Parshas Shavua, as the weekly Parsha, we have the mitzvah of giving the half shekel. And the mitzvah is given as follows. God speaks to Moses saying, when you will uplift the head of the children of Israel in their counting, and this word is lipkudehem, which in other Mamorim the Rebbe discusses this idea. Zayitnu, the following is what they should give, and there the verses go on to speak about the half shekel. Lechaper al nafshesechem, to bring about atonement for your souls. We know the general, specific and the specific lessons that we learn in a general sense about these ideas. In addition to the specific, quite specific details that the Alter Rebbe in his discourses in Torah enumerates, and in the discourses of the subsequent Rabbeim, Adle Drushe Bal Hailula Dasir Bishvat, up until, of course, the discourses of the one who had the Hilula, the passing in this month of Shvat, on the 10th of Shvat, the Rebbe's Rebbe, the previous Rebbe. What is the lesson that this mitzvah teaches us, and what is its specific concept in serving God that the human being can do? Now, the Rebbe says, let's discuss this. The Torah is eternal. The Torah is forever. According to that which the Zohar tells us, the Zohar says, why is Torah called Torah? What does Torah mean? What does that word mean? Begin de oiri. Because it is a lesson. It's a teacher. It teaches us. And therefore, that's the idea of a Torah, to give us specific instructions. Harehi gam hiro nitzchis. If the Torah gives us an instruction, it's an eternal instruction. It's forever. B'chol mokim or b'chol zman. Get out the yellow highlighters. In all space, for all time. Here the Rebbe is saying this clearly. And the lesson that the Rebbe is going to teach us, the Rebbe was telling us then, 40 years ago, that this is something that's forever. This is energy that I'm going to give. This is inspiration. This is strength. More than that, according to the explanation, which is well known, that the Rebbe's Rebbe, the Rebbe's father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, explains also, based on this Zohar, this word Torah, which in Aramaic is called Oiraisa, and even if you look at the word earlier that they used for instruction, the Oire, which means lesson, like Hayro, like Moira, means a teacher, but it also has the word Oir. Oir is light. So the previous Rebbe says that that's not a coincidence, because it also comes from the terminology, the word Oiraisa, which means Torah in Aramaic, is also Oir Yese. Light will come forth. The Torah, its whole goal is to show us and to instruct us the way to serve God in a way that's revealed of light, an luminous revelation. So whatever lesson we're going to learn from this mitzvah, it has to be revealed and it has to be illuminating something for us, bringing clarity. Whatever lesson we're going to learn from this mitzvah, it's going to be in the fundamentals of the mitzvah and in its details. Because they're all part of the Torah, which the Torah comes from the term instruction and lesson. So if this is the case, then we have to understand the following. What is the eternal lesson in this mitzvah? Regarding this mitzvah, it says when you will uplift. And it's speaking about the individual. It doesn't say when you will all, when the plural, but in the singular, the koyal Moshe Rabbeinu, it's a reference to Moshe, that Moshe, our teacher Moses, will uplift us. This command was given at the time of Moses, specifically. Take out the yellow markers. What does this teach us in the service of each and every individual Israelite for all time? Was given, and it was a command that Moses was instructed to do, and it was, as we'll see, some of it was a one-time deal. We also have to understand, generally speaking, regarding the mitzvah of giving the half shekel, that everyone had to give a half of a shekel, the monetary coin that was used at that time, the currency, I should say. And then is and this mitzvah was fulfilled actually so when the temple was standing every single year, everyone had to give a half a shekel. That's, by the way, why we read it at the beginning of Adar, because from the beginning of Adar is when they collected it annually, as the Mishnah tells us in Shkalim. Nevertheless, because the Torah, it's a part of Torah which is eternal, so even though it happened only when the temple was standing, but we understand that there's an everlasting lesson for all time. In other words, even when the temple is not standing, unfortunately. We have to understand what this is about. In a more detail, more specific detail. Rashi, when he explains this verse, that has the mitzvah of giving the half shekel, and his source is, of course, in the Talmud. But the fact that he brings it in his commentary in the Torah shows us that this is the simplest way of understanding the verse. Isa, Rashi says, Ramaz Lahem Kan Gimel Trumas, that this verse speaks about and alludes to 3 times when they had to give donations. So, etc. Now the first one that's alluded to here is that there was a collection taken up when they donated the material to build the sanctuary in the desert. That's the first one. Then there's 2 more that were made from half of a shekel. Achas Trumas Adonim. One of them was the donation that made up ultimately the sockets for the sanctuary, which we actually read in this week's Parsha. This week they coincide. The Parshas Truma, we have that mitzvah. The year when this was said, it was Parshas Mishpatim. But we read this in the additional Torah. This week we have 3 Torahs, by the way, because it's also Rosh Chodesh. So, the one of the times that the half shekel was given was for the sockets for the sanctuary. Everybody gave a half a shekel, and from these half shekels, which were shekels of silver, they were all melted down, and they made the sockets for the sanctuary in the tabernacle in the desert, the Mishkan. Vashen is in the second collection. Chulu v'nosnu kol echad machzeh shekel v'hein liknis mehen korbanos tzibur shekol shana v'shana. The other donations that's referred to here is the half shekel that was given annually. With that money, they purchased the communal offerings of the whole year. So every one of the offerings, everyone's shekel was part of it, because they made one fund, and from this fund they bought everyone, and mathematically we understand that you could break down everything to as many parts as you want. So everybody paid for every one of the offerings through the year, the communal offerings. And this was done by the annual collection of the half of a shekel. So the donating of the half a shekel, there are 2 things. The first one was the sockets, the silver sockets that were holding up the boards, that were the walls of the sanctuary, the habez of korbanos hatzibur, and the second one is for the communal offerings. But all this was at the time of when Moses was alive. Then they didn't only give the donations for the offerings on the altar, but also for the sockets, because they were building the sanctuary then. But in the subsequent times, following that period, even when the temple was standing and they took up the annual collection, but they weren't building the sanctuary anymore. So there was no more half shekel to make the sockets for the sanctuary that was already built many years earlier. So if that's the case, we really have to understand what is this internal lesson regarding the donations for the sockets, that its lesson is pertinent for all times. And this would also be a lesson that is pertinent at the times when the temple was standing, because that's not when they did the collection anymore, and for this time when unfortunately the temple is not standing. The Rebbe will explain. Now, in a certain sense, the most important collection, the most important donation was the donation of the sockets, and that was more than the offerings. Why? Here's why. The sockets held up the walls, the boards for the walls. These walls held the curtains that were the roof of the sanctuary, of the Mishkan. Comes out, that comes out that the sockets are the foundation of the whole Mishkan, of that whole sanctuary. Without having the sanctuary, you wouldn't have the offerings. So therefore, most fundamental is the foundation of this holy sanctuary. So then the primary, the main thing about this parsha of all the three donations that were discussed, it has to be these adonim, these sockets that held up the whole sanctuary. That's even more. And prioritize then the offerings themselves, because first there has to be the place to contain the offerings, to bring the offerings. This adds to the previous question. So what is the eternal lesson in the donation of those sockets? And more than that, since the first thing at the outset it says, when you will uplift the head of the children of Israel, from this we understand that as an introduction and a preparation for giving the half shekel, there has to be this idea of uplifting the head. And who did it? Moses, our teacher. He's the one who uplifted the head. If that's the case, we have to understand then what is this idea of uplifting in our service to God, which is the preparation for the half shekel, and specifically regarding the donation of the silver sockets. We understand that this lesson is going to be not just in the innermost secrets of the Torah, which is symbolized by the oil, that's the secret, that floats on top of wine. Oil certainly floats on top of water. The water is the revealed part of Torah. So this lesson is not only going to be theoretical and abstract and Torah study, which is wonderful and important, and it is part of it, but it also has to permeate our actual day-to-day deeds and actions in how we serve God. Like the Mishnah rules, that the primary is the deed, not just Torah study, but because Torah brings to the deed. That means a deed in this world of action. Even though a deed is the lowest thing, it's the most physical. There's nothing lower than just our actions. It's our thought. It's much higher. Our emotions, etc. But deed, the task, the act, that's the lowest thing. And if it's the lowest, then it is the foundation which the whole building stands on. So the deed is the most important. And as we know, especially Kabbalistically, the way things are, the difference the way they are in the lower realms and the supernal realms. Very interesting concept here. So, he say to Govei min abinyan. So when you look at things in the supernal realm, the foundation is higher than the building. In other words, it's the way it comes down. When in the lower realm, the foundation is on the bottom. It's a little bit like when you have the wall, and if all the bricks fall away, the further they are, the higher they were to start with. But here, that's a similar concept. But here, we're saying that the foundation it starts from the highest realms, as we discussed in the previous Mamorim, that everything gets higher and higher, more concealed, so it's more fundamental. Whereas in the lower realm, the foundation holds everything up, it's on the bottom. So Masha'inkin, Lamata Be'elam Hasiya, I said Lamata Min Abinyan, in this world, the foundation is under the building. The whole building has to stand on the foundation. Beis, the Yuv and Alpihom, Shalamata Hayasaid, Hulamata Min Abinyan. So according to this, that on our realm, the lower realms, the foundation is under the building, the way it was, the sockets, the silver sockets of the sanctuary. They were the foundation. They held up the boards, like it's intricately described this weekend as we studied in the portion of Chumash a couple of days ago. Shaleim omdu akroshim v'hayediyis v'chol mishkan, that on these sockets stood the boards and the curtains, the covering, the roof of the Mishkan. So from this we understand that whatever the Adonim represent, that's the idea of the foundation. That means it has to represent whatever the foundation is of our service to God. Right? The idea of these silver sockets in Ba'avedis Ha'adam and serving, that the person serves God, who Yisoid Kol Ha'avedis, there must be whatever the foundation is of everything. Well, what is the foundation of everything that we do? There has to be something that's at the source of the mere fact that we go and we do what we are supposed to. Here it is, bingo. This is the idea of accepting the yoke, just doing it because you have to do it. Not because you like it, but because you have to, because it's right, because that's what God wants. It's called Kabbalah Soil, acceptance of the yoke of heaven. Like we learned in Tanya at the beginning of chapter 41. So the beginning of serving God and its primary part and its root, that is the idea of the accepting the yoke upon oneself. Just calling it, we colloquially call it Kabbalah Sale. You have to have Kabbalah Sale. You have to do it because you're supposed to do it. Whether you like it, whether you're not, whether you're comfortable, whether you're not comfortable, whether it makes sense, it doesn't make sense. You do it with Kabbalah Sale, not because you feel like it, etc., etc. And once you do it because of Kabbalah Sale, everything else grows on that. So, how do you get this Kabbalah Sale to be the way it should be? So this has to be founded on the idea of our belief and our faith. Because, why should we do it? Because we believe. Because we believe, we do what's right. How do you bolster the Amunah? This is done to the uplifting of the head. Even the head and the body, the head is higher than the rest of the body, even naturally so, the way it was created. It doesn't just stay where it is. It's uplifted. It has to get higher than its level. What is the level of the head? The head is the intellect, the chokhmah. We need to go higher than that. We need to go to belief. It's a higher realm. It has we have to go higher from the level of this wisdom and intellect, which is the head, to the level of emunah, faith, belief, which is higher. And that makes sure that this acceptance of the yoke, the Kabbalah Sel, should be the way it should be, because it's based in strong faith. If that's the case, then we can understand why it was Moshe that was needed to do this. And this is harboring on a concept, the final mimer that the Rebbe gave us, that the Rebbe edited in 57, 52, prior to his illness. The mimer of Atet Tzava, there he speaks about also the fact that Moses is the one that shepherds faith, that strengthens and bolsters faith. So here, this is a different point than is brought there, but the Rebbe discusses, from this we understand why Moses specifically had to do this. Like the Torah says specifically, this is a command to Moses. Should uplift us, like we said at the outset, in the singular. In the simplest realm, Moses is the one who gave us the whole Torah, told us everything that we have to do. So he's the one who told us for the half shekel too, and to give the donation for the silver sockets, because the revelation of belief and faith amongst Israel is specifically through Moshe. The Hainu, Moshe Kipshutei. First of all, it means Moses. Moses, the one who took us out of Egypt, the one who received the Torah, etc. Nasi Hadoyer, and that's also the Moses that is represented by the Nasi, the prince and the leader of each and every generation. That's the concept of Moses for all time. That's representative of Moses. And then and then there's a level of Moses in each and every one of us. We all have a Moses inside of us. Like we learned, we actually learned this a few weeks back, this idea. So first of all, there's a Moses in everybody, because Moses is the Nasi, the leader is everything. Therefore, everything that's within Moses is in everybody else, because Moses is within everybody else. This is in a Rashi and Chukas. This is what we already discussed a few times. The Talmudic dictum on the verse that says, "And now Israel, what is God asking of you? Just a little bit of fear of heaven." So the Talmud says, the Talmud just says, "Oh, and now what is he asking of you? Just to fear heaven." Is that such a small thing? Is that so simple? Is that so doable? And then the Talmud says, yeah, indeed. In relation to Moses, it's very simple. Well, how does that answer the question? He's talking to everybody here, not just to Moses, and to everybody. It's still tough. But because it's simple for Moses, get out the yellow markers, then it becomes simple and small and easy for everybody, because we all have a piece of Moses in us, because we all, each and every individual Israelite has this piece of Moses within himself, and in relation to that piece, it is easy. You have to tap into that energy. This can affect our abilities and capabilities when we tune into and tap into the energy of the Moses that we have within ourselves. And it affects the thought, speech, and deed when you choose to use this. What does it say subsequent to the verse, "And now Israel, what does God ask of you?" Just a bit of fear. It says, to go in all of his paths and all of his ways. In other words, take that, and that's an impetus to succeed in everything. The Milsa Zutrasin is such a sense that it becomes a small thing. It's no biggie. Like the verse tells us in Deuteronomy, that it is so close to you, so very much so, in your mouth and in your heart to do. And by the way, the Rebbe points out, in this verse, we have enumerated thought, speech and deed. Because it says, beficha, in your mouth, that's speech. Lubavitcher is your thought process in your heart. Lasai says your deed. So what is this idea that everybody in every Israelite has this Moses, three things that Rebbe says. It's all this quintessential yid that we have within ourselves. That this is the quintessential point of belief and faith, the quintessential point of our Judaism, of the Yiddishkeit, and the quintessential point of the Chochmah, the wisdom that's connected and bound with godly wisdom and Torah. It's not just that point of faith, nekuda bilvad, and then it's stuck with just having a little point of faith. But that faith affects everything. The faith now is enclosed in understanding. You build it now by divine providence. We're finishing the Rambam and beginning again the course of the study of the Rambam. And the first mitzvah in the Rambam is to know that there's a first being who caused all other beings to be, so to speak. And the Rebbe expounds elsewhere that the mitzvah isn't to believe, because that you already have naturally, that's a requisite to having commandments, but it's to bolster the belief by furthering your knowledge of God, and that bolsters the belief. So the belief brings it into the pursuit of understanding and grasping it, and that strengthens the belief. Shalochin, it's a little bit cyclical. Shalochin ikras b'shem nekudas hachachma, and therefore it's called this quintessential point of chachma, of wisdom, because then it comes into its development and grasping and understanding. Ad lameach hadas shehu naftecha dechol shis, until the third part of the intellect, which is called das, the knowledge, the result. Right? We've spoken many times about the idea of keser chachma bina. That would be the goal and the wisdom and the development, the understanding. And then there's the way we enumerate it, the way in a practical sense is chachma bina das. Das is already the result that's able then to straddle into the next realm and bring it into the emotions and the feelings and the action. So from das, it becomes practical. And therefore, in Kabbalistic terminology, in the Zohar, it's called the key to that includes the six subsequent spheres of Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, and that's a Chod Yesod. Now, Malchus is not included because Malchus really is included because it's made up of all of them. So it means the six that are the male spheres, so to speak. Kindness, severity, the beauty that's made up of both, which of course means the mercy, etc. Perseverance and strength, fundament. And this becomes practical in our day-to-day life, in thought, speech, and deed. That's the primary thing. So it comes out that the whole idea of Moses is to bring this quintessential point of faith and the Kabbalah Sel, the acceptance of the yoke, to bring it into the lowest realms, to our nitty-gritty, day-to-day life. Ma'aseh b'peil, action. And in this specifically, that the purpose of this is that it should come into the body and the animal soul, in your part, which is your responsibility in the world, and then going into the whole wide world. But the Talmud says, hey, somebody who's incarcerated cannot free themselves from their incarceration. You need help. Therefore, the head has to be uplifted. This idea, uplifting the head. For every descension, there has to be extra strength that's given from a higher realm. This idea of Rosh, that's a reference to all children of Israel, which are called Reishis, right? It says, Bereishis Bara, the beginning God created Reishis. It says for the Torah, which is called Reishis, Yisrael, which is called Reishis. This idea, Reishis Ha'olam, the beginning, the top of the world, the beginning, in order to affect within the whole world, we have to have the uplifting and the raising of the head. Through all this, we make the silver sockets. They are the foundation upon which the sanctuary is built. And once you have this primary foundation and the walls, then you could bring the offerings. Sheklolis, what are offerings? Sheklolis inyonim hu akrovis v'los hakeches v'chushim. The offering, the whole idea is to bring closer and to uplift our own faculties and talents and what we're made up of. Kimuva b'drusha elula, like the and now we're still in Shvat. So the Rebbe again quotes like his father-in-law, and his Rebbe brings in the Mamorim of the Basi Lagani that are called the Mamorim of the day of the passing of the previous Rebbe. Hainu gam hachushim shebe'ilam hazat tachten, and this includes the faculties of the lowest realm. This all has to be elevated and involved. The idea of a faculty and a talent and something which something is felt, literally, is only pertinent in this physical world. But we can uplift all of this to the highest of realms, like we spoke about in Basi Lagani, this idea of tapping into how God is higher and higher and higher, and this we spoke about the idea that's in Tzumim, and how we can connect. Like it says in the Sefer HaBohir, which is one of the earliest Kabbalistic sources that we have. Amai ikr korban al shem shem mikarev. Why is an offering called korban? It's not sacrifice, it's called korban. What does korban mean? It means literally close. Karev means close. So the offering of the animal is called korban because it makes us closer. It makes the one who brings it closer. And the Zohar it says that the secret of the korban, of the offering, goes up to the highest realms, like to the infinite, the actual God in its highest realm. As it's explained elsewhere, the idea that the offerings are uplifting, you uplift all parts of creation, mineral, vegetable, animal, and human. Because in the technical sense, the offering itself was from a living creature, so that's the realm of the living. And from the vegetable, because there was oil and wine and wheat, etc., flour. And the mineral, there was salt. The verse says, with all the offerings, you have to offer up salt. And how does it elevate humanity? That's the person. The kohen, the priest who brings the offering. And really, in a specific sense, it goes on every single Israelite. Because everyone is involved in all of the offerings, especially the communal offerings. So it says, the Kohanim who served God, and they actually brought it, to the Levites who stood on the platforms and praised God, and the Yisrael, there was representative of all the Jews who were there also to pray, they used to fast, etc. Because really it says regarding everyone that you should be from a kingdom of kohanim, of priests. So therefore from this we know that the idea of the offerings is very general. It's a general goal of serving God, to bring ourselves closer, higher to God. Like it says when it speaks about the first mitzvah bringing the offering, it doesn't say when somebody from amongst you wants to bring the offering, but it says when a person brings from of you an offering. So that means the offering is from the person himself, meaning you offer yourself up, not in the sense of sacrificing, but of bringing yourself closer. And then that uplifts the whole world, because we're here to make the world a godly place and animate everything in the world, make everything happen in the world. So what's the foundation of all this? The foundation of everything circles back to the sockets, the silver sockets. It says, this is accepting the yoke. Very interesting. This is what it says subsequently when it speaks of the mitzvah. It says everyone has to give a half shekel. A wealthy person couldn't give more than half a shekel, and a poor person shouldn't give less. So wealthy shouldn't give more, poor shouldn't give less. Everyone has to give half. The Rebbe points out an interesting concept. Since everybody has to accept the yoke of heaven, it's equal. Doesn't matter. Someone who's rich, wealthy spiritually, and someone who's poor spiritually. Everyone has a different job, different task. But they all do their part. And therefore, it's not that this one has to do more, this one has to do less. No one could add, no one could take away. You have to do what you're cut out for. Even though there's different tasks and jobs amongst them, doesn't mean that there's something missing. Everybody has to do something else because everybody's a little bit different. And therefore the one who's poor doesn't mean he's missing something because he's not doing what the other one doesn't. And it's not better when somebody who's wealthy and does something else in a spiritual sense. Everyone is the same. The Rebbe takes as an example the Levites themselves. Bnei of the Levites, some of them were singing and playing the instruments for Oiskim B'Shira. And then there are those that were responsible for locking up the gates of the temple every day. They took care of the gates. They didn't change the tasks. This one is a professional gatekeeper. This one is a professional singer. And this is what they did. They were both from the tribe of Levi. They were both Levites. This even says regarding Moshe Rabbeinu, like the Gemara tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu himself was from the singing Levites. Move on. Doesn't take away from the fact that they're all equal Levites. They all have to do whatever their task is set out to be, wherever they are. Regarding the Levi, it says the name Levi means somebody who's an adjunct, who's connected. That's what we say to escort someone as Leviya, because you connect to them. They will connect to you and serve you. They're connected to the Kohen in his service. That's the idea of connecting and then broadening the connection to godliness, because connecting to the Kohen. And this is all based on the original Levi who was born, the third son born to Jacob and Leah. When she names him, Leah names him, she said, now that I have the third son, my husband will be more connected to me. But everyone has to do their task. And like I see somebody in a house of healing that somebody is mopping the floor. I say, look, your task is just as important as the brain surgeon, because you will promote the healing, and each one in their different task, what it is. Because if it's going to be dirty, God forbid, the person won't get better. So, now that Rebbe goes back and says, and now from this we could also understand, just generally speaking, the difference between Kohanim serving their Avodah and the Leviim and the Levites in their piece, Yisrael b'ma'amodam, the Israelites in their piece. You think, only a Kohen could bring the offerings, so maybe a Levi and an Israelite, a Levite, is not sufficient because they can't bring karbanos. No, that's not something missing. They each have a different job, even though they can't bring an offering. It's not your job. On the contrary, it indeed says that the whole kingdom, all of us, will be the Kohanim. The Baal Turim even says that's a reference to like a high priest. When God says, I want you to be a nation of priests, in that level, in that sense, everyone is that way. The advantage and the specialty of each and every Israelite is like a high priest specifically. This shows us that the advantage and the importance of every Israelite is equal. But the task and the mission of the Yisraelim and the Levim is not the same as the mission for Kohanim. This is the idea of wealthy and poor. Everyone has a different task. But this doesn't lessen one's stature. The stature of all are the same, are equal. Now one is not more, one's less. Take out the yellow markers, the yellow highlighters. Everyone understands in the service of each and every individual. Should I call them the Rebbe? Every human being is created in the image of God. Adam like Adam, the first one. Is that Adam prior? The first person. Adam. The East of Medrash. The Medrash tells us, God showed to Adam every single righteous person that is in the future will come from him. Yeshu Talib somewhere coming from his head. Yeshu Talib Saida, somewhere coming from his hair. Yeshu Talib Mitzray, somewhere coming from his forehead. Whatever, that's what the Medrash describes. This is the various different levels that there are amongst the children of Israel. The tasks are different according to where their soul is coming out from, where within Adam the soul is coming from the soul of Adam. And this also doesn't say that someone is lacking or somebody's better. Everybody has a different task and job, so it takes a village. Everybody was created equally in the image of God. And this is also regarding the root of Israel in Torah, like the verse says. There, this is a very famous. The verse says, "This is the Torah of a person who," and it says subsequently what happens if there's impurity, etc. But we can cut it off at this spot, and then it says, "This is what the Torah is about." Adam, the person, what they're going to keep it. There are 600,000 letters in the Torah. Every single letter in the Torah has its importance. So, like the Rambam says, and it's of course taken from the Talmud, every single word and every concept in Torah is all part and all holy. So, where the verse says, and Timnah was the concubine, which is really tough. She was a tough person because her relationship with that fellow was a relationship of incest. Was her brother, which was her father, which was her boyfriend, her husband. She was right. So this word v'timna Pelegish is just as holy as the beginning of the 10 Commandments. I am the Lord your God. Both, if any of those letters is missing the Torah, the whole Torah is not kosher. It's not fit. And then some of the souls, right, if every soul is connected to one of the letters in Torah, so some people's soul is connected into the Taf of Timnah, or the Mem of Timnah, or the Nun of Timnah, right? And some is connected to Aleph of Anoichi, and the Nun of Anoichi, and the Chof of Anoichi, right? Doesn't matter which part. It's all holy. Just like the holiness of the whole Torah is dependent on the completeness, every single letter has to be complete. And not only that, every single letter, a letter can't be connected to another letter. Every letter has to have an outline of white that it's written on. In other words, one letter cannot be touching another letter, or a letter can't be at the edge. Let's say we don't write that low anyway but if it was, let's say a letter went down till the end, then the bottom of the letter wouldn't be surrounded by white. Every letter has to be surrounded by, it has to be its own unique letter, not touching anything else. Which just, that I was saying, illustrates the uniqueness of everyone. has to be on its own. Kain hu gam Yisrael. This is how it is in every individual Israelite. Their completion is dependent on every single person is important. Every single person has a task. Everyone has their unique mission, and we're missing. If somebody doesn't have it, then no one has it. It's the whole thing is not complete. That person has their unique, important task. And everyone is equal in general in their holiness. The reason that the difference of tasks between the pauper and the wealthy doesn't change their stature, because we're all rooted in a place which is higher than all of these differences, similar to tshuva, which is higher than the nitty-gritty of the transgression that may have taken place. So repentance is that the same thing, that the equality, the source of every soul is from the same place before any missions and tasks get made. Therefore they're all united with total unison. In their root, in the essence and makeup of God. Now, in that level, there's no difference between 10 or less than 10 or more than 10. But the point is that we have to go from there into this nitty-gritty world. And therefore, there does make difference numbers. And therefore, since the ultimate of the revelation of the world is with 10 is a complete number. 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11. Like it says in the Kabbalistic work of Parshas, that's why the complete number is 10. Chassidic explains it in many places. One of the things it says is that Klippa is not balanced, and therefore it has 11. Therefore we have the spices that counterbalance. Therefore it says that there are 20 gera in this shekel, and then you have to give half of the shekel, which will of course be 10. Because that symbolizes bringing it down into this world where 10 is a complete number. And therefore the donation ends up being 10 gera. But then, of course, we say this, it's half, because that also symbolizes the reciprocity and we completing for God, and God completes for us. Because of the verse for Dalit. The verse finishes, to atone for your soul. This illustrates the ultimate of serving God in Torah and its mitzvahs. Here, kapara, atonement, doesn't mean that you did a sin and now you're getting atoning for it. But like the Rebbe brings in the Tanya, the epistle of repentance and return, like it says regarding an offering, that you bring the offering and therefore God is appeased by it, and therefore it'll bring about this idea of kapara, this atonement. But here's what the atonement means. This is like the gift that is given after you already asked for forgiveness, and you were already forgiven, you already did tshuva, and you were forgiven, you don't have any more punishment. Like a person who screwed something up with the king, soiled himself, and the king then, he appeased the king through an advocate, and the king then forgave him. Now after all this, then he sends a gift. He sends a gift, then it's an extra measure. That's the atonement. That it should be appeased and at goodwill and satisfactory and dear before him, may be blessed. So that the God should have pleasure from his service. Let's finish this up here and listen what the Rebbe says. Something phenomenal and profound. This idea is particularly pertinent in this generation of the heels of Mashiach. This idea of having to have an advocate, an atonement, we already had in the previous incarnations, in the previous generations. So the Rebbe says, this is all done, we're so close already, we're that close. Here we need the second type of atonement, the present, the gift, to make that makes him comfortable and pleasurable. And like it says, that it is a pleasure before me. When it says God has pleasure, it's especially pleasing that I said something and my will was done and fulfilled. This is talking about the supernal, loftiest will of God. It's God's pleasure. In a way that it is total pleasure before me in the highest level. The innermost of the supernal pleasure of God, which we know there's a relationship between pleasure and will. Which one brings which? You want something because you enjoy it because and then you want it because you enjoy it. So they're equal. Kabbalistic terminology, this is the level called the innermost of Atik, which is so high in creation that it's not something that we can that is revealed to us. This will only be revealed in the future to come. Mashiach comes, Kidua, as is known. All the revelations of godliness that we have in this time is from lower than that level of the innermost of Atik, of that level within God's crown, within God's decision to create. But when in the future to come, we'll be able to see this piece of God that's so high that He decided He's going to start the ball of the chain of creation. This idea of Pnimius Atik. It'll be drawn down in a way that of the created within creation to have this pleasure. Like it says in the prophecy, when Mashiach comes, the glory of God will be revealed and all flesh will be able to see it. And like the Rebbe said elsewhere, that they won't even need eyes, the flesh will be able to see it. This is stressed especially on the day of the Holy Shabbos. That I've been in the time that's the most auspicious of all times. That's the afternoon of Shabbos, and that's when the Rebbe was speaking, said the Maimer. That's the revelation of this level of the simplest pleasure in the supernal realms. Like it says, and is explained in the Chassidic discourses and texts. And like it says, everyone who brings pleasure to Shabbos, God then shows His appreciation. And this is, of course, in the spiritual sense, even greater. That we increase and add pleasure into the Shabbos by doing what we're supposed to do. So it doesn't mean pleasure, just mean because enjoy yourself, but to be spiritual. And then that comes down to the serving God in this physical world, the lower world, and with physical pleasure. That's why we bring the dwelling place for God here in the lower realms, in a way of pleasure, like God lusted to have a dwelling place here. We draw down this supernal pleasure in a way that God says, I have pleasure because I said something and my will was done. Where will this happen? The base, Hamikdash Lamata, and the holy temple here in this world, which will be the third temple, which will be built. In the truthful redemption through our rights, Mashiach, He will come and He will redeem us and bring us upright to our land of Mendel, of Menachem, and speedily in our days. Actually, so everyone should take strength from this and boast our Kabbalah soil, closer to God, and bring redemption to the world. L'chaim.